Debbie Molino, the instruction leader for the school council department here at Wilton High School. And on behalf of the department, I want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to come out on this rainy evening. We are so fortunate to have 7 reps from various group colleges. And what I'm going to ask them to do is share where they're from, and then we'll kind of move forward from there.
Good evening. I'm Becky Tynan from Yale University.
Hey everyone, I'm Joanna Poole and I'm from Washington College.
Hello. Hello. I'm Ann Fleming Brown from Union College.
Hello, I'm Peter Foxen from UConn.
Hey y'all, my name is Sarah Berner. I'm from Tulane University.
I am Sue Willard from Hobart Musical Colleges.
And I'm Cynthia Gobi from Connecticut College.
So I'm going to turn it over to Christine Collins, who's going to walk us through this evening with questions and an opportunity for you all to ask questions as well. So, thank you.
A little bit hard to see, so I'm just going to scoot around to this front. Panelists, we have sophomores and junior students and their parents in the audience tonight. And before we jump into questions about the application, about admissions, I'd like to ask, what is the best advice you would give this audience as they begin this college process? And I'm really hoping someone's going to say, don't panic. Anne, could you kick off this evening for us?
I have so much advice. I'm just trying to give you a couple of things. First of all, students, you may not have heard this before, but if you study and get good grades, the results will be fantastic when you apply to college. So if you can find an extra 15 minutes in your day to study, review, meet with a teacher, correct a test, reread a section of something that you've been reading, take advantage now when you have time. I see mothers elbowing their children. This is your chance to show us that you are on the upward trend, that you are improving. So when your transcript is on the big screen in the admissions committee room and we see the transcript in front of us, everyone looks at it and says, well, look at how she improved. That's the outcome you want. Now parents, you've got a much tougher job. I've done it twice. The worst moment was this. Our daughter applied to college. I said, that's great. My husband was in the living room. He looked at me and he said, do you think that we did everything we could possibly done? And I said, she does not eat enough vegetables and she does not know how to ice skate, but otherwise she's ready to go. So parents, do your best and know that these wonderful children are going to land at fantastic colleges where they will grow and become themselves and then become your friends.
Thank you. Cynthia, may I ask the same question of you, please? The best advice that you can give our audience.
Sure. Well, I guess that I would address this to the students. And this has to do with the concept of fit. You'll be hearing a lot about this from your counselors if you haven't already, and as you read more about the college search process, you're going to be coming across this concept quite a bit. It's not so much about where you would fit in, but fit has very much to do with where you will feel at home as you are and with your gifts that are unique to you as they're constituted in you, a place where you will feel at home in such a way that you will be able to thrive and develop those gifts fully. And in order for the fit to be good, in order when you're shaping up that short list a couple of however many months from now, you have to have a pretty good sense of who you are. Now, having a good sense of who you are is in some ways a lifetime project, but I would say that now is a good time to start giving yourself permission to think about that and to truly be true to who you are and to not be comparing yourself to other people. It's so important to have a sense of who you are and who you aren't in order to make the right fit choice. Choices, because they're always more than one. And give yourself permission to do that, and don't stress out about it. And you'll be very glad that you've done this when you come to the essay, because you're going to need to be very true to yourself in writing that, to write who will
lot of head nods on that one. Joanna and Peter, I'm going to address this question to you. The most difficult part of the application for students is the personal statement. What do you expect to read? What are you looking for? And then what is the impact of a supplemental question if required? Peter?
So the first thing with the personal statement, this is something I really enjoy speaking about because when I'm reviewing an applicant, I read through the entire common application first before I get to the transcript or the test scores or any other piece, and that includes the essay of the personal statement. The important piece to know is that each and every essay that I've read, over 3,000 last year, personally, my colleagues have read plenty as well, is that each one is unique. Each one is special to that student. Each one is personal. It's telling a story about a place that the student has been, something that they hope to go, an experience that they've had that's helped to shape who they are. We just heard a little bit about fit. That, and in particular for the essay that was mentioned again, I think that is just so important. That personal statement being something unique to the student. Whether that is, like I mentioned, the trip that you went on with your school, something that you've done in your local community, that personal statement really tells us a story about who you are. And that is something that your application should be telling us entirely, is who you are as an individual, as an applicant, as someone who's looking to go on to various different places in their life, but most, in the closest part of the near future to college, just tell us about who you are and what has gotten you to that. Second piece is
A supplemental essay, if there is a supplement.
So oftentimes the supplemental essay will be one that's very specific to that particular school. It gives you an opportunity to show your interest in the school, gives you an opportunity to build upon what you've already completed in your application. It's just an additional opportunity to speak about who you are and your character. And I think it's one that's very important as well, much like the essay and the personal statement for the common app for the individual application for your schools. That supplement is exactly as it says, a supplement to the application that you've already completed. I think that's something that should not be taken lightly. It's just a further opportunity to expand upon who you are and what you've done and where you'd like to go.
Jan?
So a little bit of redundancy, I think, for me, but usually when I meet with students, I try to say, be the most yourself you can be. It was talked about a little earlier on about, finding who you are and a lot of fit. And sometimes the most impressive essays I read are students talking about how they don't really know who they are yet. But here is how college is going to help me figure that out. And sometimes it's most enjoyable to read about something they've done in their community or to talk about an experience that means the most to you. I think it's being genuine. You'll have a couple eyes look over that essay, so make sure that you trust the people looking over it to give you very, very good feedback because it's your best opportunity to do the form piece of your application. There are some very cool things that don't change, that you and students across America will do the exact same thing. That essay is going to be just you. So be true to who you are because that's the most fun for me. I think my colleagues will agree. There are some essays that make you laugh out loud and some that really move you. That's the best range you can ask for, but as long as it's genuine and that comes across. We do not have a supplement, so for me, it's really where the student shines.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
As far as the personal statement goes, I echo what my colleagues have said, but I think the advice that I find myself giving students most is write what you want to tell us, not what you think we want to hear. So I often find that there are two different kinds of statements. There are the statements that follow that sort of formula of what students often feel that a college personal statement should be about. We read about a lot of the same topics because they seem like the kind of thing that you think a college would want to hear about, overcoming challenges or maybe, certain activities that fit in well with who you think that college wants to see. But some of the best personal statements I read are ones that are the most outrageous, quirky stories. I told some of the students this, that my favorite personal statement last year was a student who had chronically sweaty palms, and he talked about how hard it was to date in high school because nobody wanted to hold his hand in the hallway. And although I found myself very invested in his romantic endeavors, what I loved about it was that he did something that nobody else had done, and that's what made his statement so effective, was he differentiated himself among a lot of other highly capable students in a way that told me a lot about his personality, his sense of humor, his creativity. And so that's okay if you have a funny story or something that feels like maybe a little bit different than what other kids are writing about, then write about that, because as we said, that will be the most authentic interpretation and representation of who you are. So if it feels right to you, then that's what you should write about.
Thank you. It was very important to get across to the audience. We have a couple of $1 million questions tonight. This is going to be the first one. And I'm going to address Becky and Suzanne with this one. Testing. And that new lovely SAT that we've all heard about. Brief thoughts. And then going forward with that same topic, certainly our juniors in the audience are interested to know, will you accept both the old and the new SAT? Will there be eventually a cutoff date as to when you will stop accepting the old SAT? And then here's something we hear all the time, from students especially. Your school is test optional. Do you really mean it? And if you do not accept test scores, is there one part of the application that becomes more important? I know, sorry, there's a lot of questions in that one. We can break it down. First, let's just talk about this new SAT. And what will you expect from the juniors this year? Becky?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure if the audience is aware that this is a surprise event for us in terms of the questions that we're getting. So I'm excited to get the $1 million question. Thank you for that. In terms of the new SAT, we're obviously hearing a lot of questions about this. There is an unknown factor here. I think that the best thing that I can say in terms of the new test coming out is that there have been recenterings, there have been new versions of tests that have come through over the years for those of us who've been doing this for a little while. And so I think it's important for you to know that we don't have concerns about how this is going to happen. I think it's very clear that the College Board has been thoughtful and methodical in this process. We are confident, certainly speak for our office, in saying that we're confident that we'll have the tools that we will need in terms of concordance tables and things like that in order to evaluate the new assessment appropriately for students. So I know that it may seem like this unknown piece of things, but know that there are a lot of discussions and very good work being done behind the scenes to make sure that when this rolls out, everyone is prepared to assess this appropriately. These are going to be apples and oranges assessments, and we know that. And so there is in no way going to be a comparison of scores on the current SAT. They're not going to be compared directly in any way to scores on the new redesigned SAT. That's a concern that we hear about a lot. In our case, at Yale, we'll be accepting both the current and the redesigned SATs for current juniors, so those will be applicants to the class of 2021, as well as current sophomores, applicants to the class of 2022 for us. So we'll have those two overlap years, and then after that, we'll be moving on purely to the redesigned piece of things. So I think that's sort of the best I can say.
Yeah, thank you. And Suzanne, before I turn that question over to you, do we have a test optional school? So then, Suzanne, I will give it right back to you then. Would you address that? And being test optional, do you really mean it?
Yes. It's funny, I think all the schools that are test optional always get that question. It's okay, well, they say they're test optional. I don't know if I should submit them, maybe I just should submit them. If a school says that they're test optional, they really are test optional. Some will require some supplementary essay possibly. I know for my school that we don't require supplementary essay. We've been test optional for 8 years. Our infinite pool is half done submitted, half didn't. I think, what you should ask yourself when considering whether to submit scores if it's a test optional school or not is, do your scores reflect who you are academically? And you can speak with your guidance counselors about that, which are all sorts of tables that you can look at and say, well, at this GPA, I scored this on the ACT or SAT. How does that compare? Okay, we're not trying to trick you with that. One of my admissions colleagues once had a great analogy for schools that are test optional. I think our theory on it is what do we want to base judgment on their academic potential? Do they have hours of work or 3.5 years of work. Okay, now, we respect the fact that there are some schools that are so large they need another piece of academic material to base some judgment on academic potential. So every school is different, but if a school says that they're test optional, they truly are test optional. But just know if you choose not to submit scores, that you need to make sure that there is additional information that you need to submit to that school.
Thank you. Sarah and Cynthia, the resume, another part of the application. First of all, do you accept resumes? And then do you recommend that a student submit one in addition to what they will be listing on the application? And along that note, when is sending too much additional information too much? And I guess that goes hand in hand with letters of recommendations as well. So Sarah, can you address that for us, please?
Sure. So I get that question a lot, and I think honestly, whatever the student's preference is typically fine with us. So if the student would rather submit a resume in lieu of filling out the application section of the application, that's fine with us. Often students find that they can, have a little bit more flexibility with formatting, as you can sort of, put bullet points for your explanation of your activities instead of doing it on the comment. So if you'd rather submit a resume, I often think that just personally they're easier to read and a little bit cleaner, so I like to see them. Sometimes they make me laugh because they have clip art with pictures on them, so you don't need to put a picture of yourself on your resume. But if you have one and you'd rather submit that, then that's typically fine with us. I think in terms of too much information on the resume, I often find that more so being the case with students emailing me about, hi, Ms. Farmer, I just wanted to let you know that I was voted Student of the Day in Science class this afternoon. That is very cool, but it is also perhaps not necessarily the type of award that will have a huge impact in our decision. So I would say if it feels like a truly significant accomplishment, something that you really feel like the university needs to know, then make sure it's in your resume, or if you want to send an email update, often students will do that with national merit, finalists and semi-finalist information. But if it's something more minor, like Student of the Day in Science class, then that's one that you can just be proud of on your own and keep it to yourself. And in terms of letters of recommendation, I typically think that less more in that sense. If you have one or two letters that really speak to a different aspect of your personality that we haven't seen in your guidance counselor recommendation, which is the only one we require, then that's certainly great. If you send, 10 or 15 letters of recommendation, I'm going to be like, what are you trying to hide? So I think that if you have a few really great insights, then those can definitely be helpful, but at a certain point, too many then sort of takes away from the impact of one or two great ones.
Thank you. Cynthia.
Well, I think I've seen some great resumes from this high school, actually, and I think making a resume is a good practice and a good experience for you. In terms of what we would prefer at Connecticut College, I think we probably aren't likely to spend much time looking at it in the context of the application. We use the common application, and you actually have the opportunity to highlight a lot of information in it. The place where the resume can be useful, I would say, is in the interview. Where you can interview, and it's really a good idea to try to interview with schools that are of greatest interest to you, assuming they offer interviews. But to be able to use that as a way of highlighting the things that have been most meaningful to you, the experiences you've had that have shaped your way of thinking and seeing the world, that's probably where at least I would say that it's most useful. And in terms of too much information, I don't think I have much more to say. I think you pretty well covered it. I enjoy being, of course, and I think a lot of us enjoy being in touch with students who have applied. However, we select, and then in terms, I'm sorry, what was the other question? Was there a question about letters of recommendation or additional letters?
Exactly. How many? Too many.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So we require 2 plus 1 from your college counselor, and those are really very important to us. We really do need them, which is why it's so important to choose your teachers well, people who really speak to you in your various facets. And we do have so many applications to read that if you do something really special someplace else, I could see including maybe one one more letter of recommendation, but beyond that, it's just really hard to read it. So it just becomes something unnecessary for you. You have enough work to deal with getting your applications up.
And your colleagues are all nodding their head and agreeing with you. Yes, Anne?
I just add that the common application for some of us limits the number of recommendations that can be submitted.
Thank you for mentioning that.
So for us, if you try to submit 10, you get 3 of them through, and they might not be your favorite ones.
Yes, Becky. At risk of beating a dead horse, I just wanted to represent a slightly different view on the resume front, which is, I think, I worry in our applicant pool at times about students who rely on their resume and do not use the appropriate spaces in their Common App to address the wonderful things that they do. Because for us, at least, I think probably many places, we're going to be looking at that list of extracurriculars that is part of the Common App to get our first introduction into what makes a student tick outside of the classroom, which is such an important part of a holistic review process. There may be a resume appended to the end of an application, but I'm not going to get there until I've read everything else in the required portions of the application. And so if a student says, please see attached resume, again and again and again, on their extracurricular part of the Common App, I'm going to feel as though that student actually, momentarily, is not engaged until I get all the way to the back of the file and actually see the attached resume. So I think it's important this is one of those questions probably where different schools handle this in different ways, and it's a good thing to ask different schools in which you have interest, how they might handle these different things. Because of course we're very interested in what students are involved in, but it is a challenge too to use the spaces on the Common App, which are admittedly very limited, to express what a student does. It actually can be really impressive to me when I see that a student has utilized the very limited space and they've edited themselves incredibly well to fit into that little space that they do have to tell us about what they're up to.
Becky, if you don't mind, I'm going to keep you talking, seeing now that you've already been to the back of the application. I'm going to perhaps maybe send you to the front. The front part of the application, which is extremely important to you and should be very important to the students in this audience, and that's the transcript. How do you evaluate a transcript? And could you clarify the importance of the student's transcript, especially senior year courses, the rigor of those courses and the grades? And then, what is the consequence of senioritis? Becky. Peter, I'm going to get to you with this one as well, if I may. Thank you.
Okay, well, this gives me a chance to also mention something that I had wanted to mention in speaking about the SAT question, which is that in the evaluation process, I would say by far the transcript carries more weight than the standardized testing. We are a school that requires standardized testing, but the transcript and how the student performs day in and day out in their coursework is going to be the much greater indicator of how they will perform in our seminars than the standardized testing. So the transcript is, I would say, the most important part of the application. And so in evaluating the transcript, there's a lot to it. It doesn't necessarily take us a ton of time, I would say. We spend more time probably evaluating essays and recommendations. But the transcript is important not only to see what kind of GPA a student may have, what kinds of grades they've received over the years, but more importantly to assess the rigor of courses that they have chosen. And that's the most important piece of this, and where we are responsible for having some context on the schools from which we read applications. We have profiles that come along. Many of you may have seen the profile that comes along with transcripts. That in many ways is our Rosetta Stone to evaluating the transcript. In that, it will give us information about what kinds of levels of courses are available, if any, if there are restrictions in terms of which students can access those courses. All those kinds of things that are very important for us to know, so that I know when I'm reading an application from Wilton High School, I may be expecting that a student has really engaged some very high-level courses, because there is a wonderful curriculum available to students at Wilton High School, and I know those courses are there for students to access. I may be reading another application from a student in rural Oklahoma, where all students, all 30 of them in the senior class, have taken the same classes in lockstep since they were in kindergarten. And that is all important context for us to know. So as we evaluate applications, we're actually first and foremost looking at that rigor, and then looking at how a student has performed in that rigor. But we want to see that a student has engaged with those upper level start to see this ramp up in rigor. I don't want to go on for too long, although I could obviously speak about this all night. I guess I'll just finish by saying one thing. One of the moments that I remember the most over the past few years in my job was giving an information session on campus. And one of the questions from a mother at the end of my presentation was very specific. My daughter, this was in August, I think, my daughter's setting up her courses for her senior fall. She has the choice to take a 6 AP course or have lunch. And I said, please let the girl eat. She needs to, so there's a balance here in that students need to make, along with their counselors and their families, make smart choices about balancing these schedules, because we certainly see a fair number of students as well who get to junior year, all of a sudden the floodgates open to all these wonderful AP courses or honors courses, and they dive in full hog feeling like they have to have every course at that level, and they plummet and have a really tough time. We'd much rather see the student that has been thoughtful and mindful about their choices and has been able to maintain their success or get on that positive trajectory that Anne was talking about early on.
Thank you. I just want to mention, Becky did bring up a good point that admissions officers do look at the transcript right along with our high school profile. And you can find that profile. It is on our headline website. And I believe it's under the About section on the Wilton High School website. Peter, your turn.
Just to further, articulate the point that balance is something that we are certainly looking for, and the balance of courses that you're taking. Sometimes students are able to show high school offers a course that they're interested in a certain field based on the types of courses that they're taking. Sometimes there are specific programs where we'd like to see students doing well in certain courses, like math and science based, do a strong curriculum in math and science, and students looking to go on to engineering or nursing or something like that. To see a student taking math and science for all 4 years is something that we see as a very positive investment in their future. But the transcript for me is a roadmap. It shows me where the students started in their freshman year, what the level of courses they were taking was at that point. And it shows that throughout the course of their 4 years, this student has grown and matured as an individual who's ready to take on a college level curriculum. Obviously, the step up in academics from high school to college, regardless of the honors or the AP courses, the step up in terms of the academic rigor at college, in terms of the time management skills necessary to do well in those classes, is something that students are able to demonstrate in the class selection, the course selection that they have in high school, and the level of those courses that they're taking. Continuing to take a full workload, a full course that they need in their senior year. That's something that is very important to all of us as counselor officers who are doing a file is to use that transcript again. Like I said, it's a roadmap that shows where the students started, how they've grown and matured and figured out as tactics best for them and challenge themselves. And knowing full well that the level that they've challenged themselves to is hopefully a level that they're going to carry over when they come to any of our institutions.
Thank you. And I think this discussing transcript segues nicely into this next question, which in my opinion, and I'm going to assume everybody's opinion, is definitely the million-dollar question, and that's GPA. And it's Wilton High School's GPA. Wilton High School, as you all know, we do not weigh our GPA. We're on a non-weighted 4.0 grading scale, and everyone's going to be on the hook for this one. Do we calculate our GPA? Do you add weight to our honors and or AP courses? And we calculate transcripts with a non-weighted GPA compared to those that have their weighted GPA. Cynthia, let's start with you, and can we go right down the line?
Sure. Well, we don't recalculate your GPA. We know Wilton High School well. What we do actually is calculate an overall academic score that takes into account both the rigor, the rigor of your curriculum and the grades that you have earned. And those two things essentially are going to balance, they're going to balance out the fact that your GPA is weighted. And I would say that, just in case you're interested, in the end, it's not, we don't admit persons precisely on the basis of their score. It just gives us sort of a point of reference. And because we're members of the NESCAC, we also need to have a kind of score system. But I have worked at another college, a very fine college, where there was a rating system between 1 and 8, and no calculations were done. You read the application, and then you decide whether the person will say a 6 or a 4. Anyway, we all do it a little differently.
Suzanne?
For us too, we do recalculate the GPA, and we look at the 5 core course areas. We look at humanities, English, foreign language, math, and science. So we do recalculate it. I think every institution will do this differently. But, we all tend to read the same schools year after year, so we're very familiar with the institutions, and the GPA is just one aspect of the student's academic profile. We actually separate GPA from the rigor of the curriculum. So we're able to balance out, okay, this student has a 3.8 GPA, but they don't really have many honors or AP courses. So this student has a 3.2 GPA, but the rigor is extraordinarily higher. So that's a way of balancing out and, the weighted or unweighted GPA. So we actually calculate those on our own because different institutions might include, phys ed grades in a calculated GPA or art or music or some of the extracurricular type of programming that we do. So we feel that we want to look at those 5 core areas and obviously looking at the rigor of the curriculum process that the student takes. So it's a bit more balanced in addition to some of the practical pieces.
Thank you.
So initially, we asked all our applicants to provide us with their unweighted GPA, so local students are prepared to do that since that's what your GPA is. She mentioned, we also look at your grades in your core classes, English, math, science, foreign language, and social studies, so we effectively recalculate your GPA there. I think for us it just makes sense because every high school calculates GPA so differently, and every school assigns weight for different AP courses or AP or honors, so by using just a simple unweighted GPA, we're able to then have a better understanding of GPAs across the board. Some schools, use plus marks or minus lines for grades. Some schools do written commentaries. Some schools do smiley faces and golden stars. So it's so different. So by trying to have sort of like a baseline understanding of the students' grades in those core classes, it makes our process in terms of reading many applications a little bit easier.
Thank you. Peter?
So specifically, I can say that we don't necessarily calculate every single day. We had about 35,000 applicants last year. Students from last year's class would still be waiting for their admissions to calculate it all. But understanding what the GPA means in the context of the school is so important. I was doing an application at Dunkin' Donuts down the road before I came here, and the highest GPA in that school is 5.17, which is not even as even as an GPA scale of a 5 or a 6 or a 7 or an 8. And it's tough to sometimes fathom how does that compare. How would a 4.49 student compare to a student here who is a 3.8 or 3.9? And as far as I'm concerned, understanding the student in the context of their certain school and the school that they're at is something that we value. The reason why I travel specifically down here to County and review the application for all the schools that I travel to is for that very reason, to make sure that I understand the context of the high school that I'm reading. I'm actually in the course of 12 months. And that is a tool that we develop, a skill that we develop as admissions officers to understand what the rigor means in a certain high school, what the GPA actual number means in a certain high school, and how that compares to other students in the context of the high school.
Thank you. Anne, you're up.
We recalculate every GPA, and it's very similar to the kinds of processes you just heard. But I just wanted to say that we're looking at the context of your school. We're also looking at your school, and I hope you know that this is a wonderful high school.
Thank you. We think so.
They don't seem to feel it, but you have a wonderful high school, and admissions people across the country actually know that. You can tell us again, we don't mind hearing it a second time, but your school counselors have represented it to us very well and thoroughly, and stay in touch with us, You really have a wonderful school. So people say to me, how do you consider students from school to school? Would it be better to have a B plus at this school than an A minus? Very confusing to me. You come from a great school, and when we're reading your folders, we know that. We know you've had wonderful preparation here.
Yeah, so the advantage to being at the end of a panel is that everybody says what you need to say before they get to you.
So to echo everyone, we actually do recalculate GPA based on your core courses, all of the ones that have been mentioned, your humanities, your English, foreign language, science, math. I will say the one thing for us is, and I use this example because I attended a Catholic high school, where the joke was, nobody gets a C in religion. So imagine for us, if we recalculated, if we didn't recalculate, some of your peers who may attend a Catholic school like mine that had, the A's there, seems a little unfair in some ways to our personal review panel. So that's why we do that. And also for us, it's how are you stacking up to the rigor at Washington College? Much to echo some of my colleagues here again, that our rigor is the thing that we're looking at the most. The numbers for us, they matter in the respect that we want to make sure you're going to be successful over the course of 4 years. So that's what your GPA tells me. We recalculate in the sense that yes, we are going to weight those honors and AP classes. I think that we are small enough, fortunately, that I can do that for every student I read here. But I will tell you that I agree. Welcome High School is a great place. So you guys are very lucky. It's a very wonderful institution. So I never worry about applicants from here. I don't think that any of it. Yeah.
Oh, well, you're all going to be invited back next year.
We do not recalculate in our process. I think a lot of great information has been shared already. I'll just say that in our process, it then becomes my responsibility as area admissions officer responsible for particular schools and school groups of applicants to make very clear to the admissions committee why I'm advocating for the students. So I need to have my ducks in a row in terms of having evaluated that rigor and knowing where a student stands in a general sense in their class. Does not matter how a school, according to their philosophy, decides to rank or not rank, or weight or not weight their grade scale. It falls on us to contextualize things for the admissions committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully that put some people at ease, or at least allowed us to understand your thinking when it comes to our non-weighted GPA. So I want to head back to you again, and Suzanne, what's the best way for our students to highlight their intangible factors? And by that I mean leadership, community service, special talents. Is that part of the application process? Or could that possibly be through an interview? What is the best way?
So I think that's very important. All of us up here, none of us are just going to choose which students we want to enroll based just on your academic achievement, because there's so much more to all of you than just what you do last year. Who you are as a person is very, very important to us, because we're not trying to fill a class, we're trying to build a community. So it's very important. How you let us know who you are. And I had someone once describe an application as a story. It's a story of you. Okay, so that's a way that you highlight who you are. And you start with a common app and talking about your activities, and whatever you're most proud of, put that first. Okay, be genuine. I think the thing that students really struggle with is, should we tell them or show them what we think that they want to hear from us, or what they need to hear about? Okay, so highlight what you're proud of. I know when I'm interviewing students, like all of us up here do offer interviews. I'm sure that we want to get to the heart of what are you involved in. Okay, and sometimes students will start just naming off their activities, and it's one of those things where I think all of us want to really hear what's important to you. Okay, depth of involvement in an activity. So you can do that through the interview. Okay, and if the school offers an interview, I recommend you take them up on it. Okay, but it's very important to know whether it's an evaluative interview or it's an informational interview. An evaluative interview means that the school will use that when considering admission for a student to an institution. An informational interview is more for you to gain information about whatever college you're person you're talking to. So, an interview is a great way for you to talk about your involvement and what's important to you and what you want to continue on in the college life for, and what you can add to that community. Obviously, we want students that are going to elevate and be successful in our classroom setting, but we also want students that are going to elevate the institution outside the classroom. So an interview is a way to do that. Talk to your guidance counselor, talk to your teachers and say, here's the message that I'm trying to get across in my application. So it's more of a cohesive statement. You can say, my involvement in, Habitat for Humanity is very important. Here's what I've done, and tell them about what you've been involved in, and whether it's athletics, whether it's theater, music, service, whatever it may be. So there's a consistent message there. A resume is a way to do that. Obviously we talked about outside letters of recommendation. More is not necessarily better, but if you do have one person from some sort of activity that you're involved in that is very important to you, maybe you submit that. But I think, like I said, an application needs to be scored. So an interview is one way of doing that. Letters of recommendation, if they echo what you think is very important. And your personal statement too. Sometimes you can really talk about that. I would say the personal statement is more, not necessarily about what you're speaking about, but what you want us to take away from the message.
Yeah, I would echo many of those thoughts. I think that there are a lot of opportunities within the Common App, within your personal statement, within your extracurricular, section to explain your intangibles, like the other things in addition to your test scores and sort of those academic pieces that make you special. You should definitely take advantage of those. So for schools that offer it, I think that's a wonderful option. There are schools, however, that don't. But I think that if you find a school you're really excited about, and that school perhaps has a regional representative, so I, for example, recruit students in Connecticut and Westchester County. So on tonight's website, you can go online and find your admission counselor, and my email's posted, so you can send me an email. The advice that I always give to students is stay in touch with me. The best way that I can get to know your individuals is if you tell me about them. So I can't exactly sit down and have an interview with every student who's interested, but often when I'm, traveling in the state, and I'll come to a high school, and I'll come to the college fair, and I'll be at different, places the students can come to in the city, and they'll come and they'll tell me they're excited about training, and they'll follow me an email, and then they'll maybe send me an email a few weeks later. And the great part about that process is that I actually get to know you in a way that is sort of like what a formal interview would accomplish, but it's just an informal sort of conversation. And the students from my territories, I want to advocate for, and I think that's for all of us with the high schools that we read for. We want our students to be admitted. So if I've had a couple of conversations with you, if I've met you at a college fair, if I've chatted with you, when I came to visit your high school, and I really feel like your intangibles are something special, something that I want to see on our campus, then that's going to make my job much easier. With the admission committee, when I can say, here are the reasons X, Y, and Z why I think this student is tremendous. Their test scores and their grades and all of that is wonderful, but here are the special things that I've gotten to know about them that I think they can bring to campus. So if you have an ability to develop a relationship with an admission counselor at that school, or sort of let them know that you're interested and want to show them this campus, then I would definitely take advantage of it. Certainly that doesn't mean email us every day. Please don't. But if you do want to get to know a school, then often we want to get to know you as well. And as she mentioned, we want to bring people into our community, not just test takers and transfers. So all those intangibles are super important, and we want to know about them.
Thank you. Sarah, you mentioned a word, and that was reader. Reader literally means reading our applications. Are all of you our Wilton High School readers? Yes. Perfect. You picked a great panel. And I'm going to ask you, Becky touched on this a little bit when she was discussing a number of AP courses versus lunch. When it comes to activities, most of our students try to get involved in several activities, along with rigorous courses and community involvement. And as counselors, our counselors try to encourage a nice balance of these activities. What advice do you have for our students to achieve a balance? Ooh, was it really tough?
Try to get enough sleep.
Okay, that's good.
It's interesting. I think that we've heard a few times on the panel tonight that intention that is that you should be you, not who you think we want you to be. Because we want you to be your best you. We're very happy with that. And we open every application. We don't open them anymore. We open the data on our computer leaders with great joy to read about each of you. You think about it as competitive college admissions, but really you can tell from this panel they want to get to know you. Now the balance is an interesting challenge. Our son thinks of himself as a lacrosse player. His activities read in the following way: lacrosse, 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 community service. That was just one thing. Lacrosse. I said, maybe you should put some of those lacrosses together and show yourself as a slightly more diverse, engaged person. Then he said sadly to me, Mom, I think I should have done more community service. And I said, it's not because your mother did not give you every possible. When you think about your activities, it's like required volunteer service, or people who actually say to me during interviews, I love this, I did that service project my mother made me. I think about what you want to be doing. Each person brings their own talents forward, and sometimes we haven't found out exactly what those talents are. And sometimes, you might be someone who likes to make scrapbooks or keeps the history of the NHS or whatever it is. Those things are great and okay. The other thing that I think worries me, because leadership seems absolute to all of you, leadership can be shown in so many different environments, in so many different ways. Our daughter came home from high school. She said to me, it's a bad day. I said, yes. She said, I was elected treasurer of the German club, not secretary. And she said, that's bad. It's not going to look good on my college applications. And I'm thinking, what difference could it possibly make if she's treasurer or she's secretary? They don't even handle money in that club. So what it is how does she participate in that club? What does that club bring to her life and do for her? And enhance the subject areas I think she's interested in pursuing. How on a team are you a leader, even if you're not a captain? How in an activity are you doing your small part? Because leadership is not a single dimension of being the president or the captain. So I think the balance is to find enough time to sleep so you stay healthy. Try to eat 3 meals a day, right? Or at least lunch. And to think about your life as meaning something being valuable to you. Hey, my favorite time in high school may be shared by some of you. In fact, we walked through the back here. The students who are in the theater production. Isn't that a thrilling time? Aren't they losing sleep this week? Of course they are, and yet it is going to be one of the most memorable experiences they have here outside of the classroom. So think not about what I want, but about what makes your life rich and full. There's one other area that surprises me. Sometimes students hesitate to talk about it, and maybe others on the panel would say something about this, and that is religious life. If you are a person who teaches at a church school, who looks after children at the mosque, who is confirmed in the Jewish faith, if you have committed extensive time in high school to a faith life, that is a very important extracurricular activity. And all of us are going to have similar opportunities and organizations on our campus. I think my favorite recently came around as an email at Union from the Atheist and Agnostic Society. And at the bottom of the email it said, all are welcome.
And you all are nodding your head while the eminent yes, Joanne.
I just really wanted to echo what Anne said about leadership. If any of you have talked to me individually about Washington College, I said we're a home for quiet and loud leaders. And I believe in the quiet treasurers every day, all day. I love the quiet leaders who stay late. Leadership can really be found in your part-time job, in taking your sibling to soccer practice, in being a responsible young adult. Doesn't always mean that you have to have 10 clubs on your resume. I really, really want to stress this point. We were talking about the interview. If you have the opportunity to do the FaceTime to say, yeah, I wish I were more involved, but this is what I did with student. Always give yourself a pat on the back for being that responsible kid who made it to your part-time job, who managed to keep a 3.5 and still picked up brother, sister, cousin, friend from wherever they needed to be picked up when you got your places. I just wanted to really echo that. I think that that's a really special thing to remember. Everybody leads differently. I could point to a bunch of famous people, like in a very cliche way, that did something very quiet and became the Bill Gates of the world. So just remember that. You can be very, very quiet and find a place to be loud on a lot of these campuses. So keep that in mind. Great point, Ian.
Thank you. Both have great things to say about this. Peter, you had mentioned receiving 32,000 applications, so I'm going to ask you this question. What kind of things make a candidate stand out among those 32,000? And are you looking for individuals that will make a well-rounded class, or are you more interested in a class of well-rounded students? Don't you always get that question? Yeah. One more time.
So I think the first point that I would make in regards to this question is everything you've been hearing so far is talking about the individual students and what that student does in high school, how it makes them unique, whether they're quiet or loud here, whether they have a very unique essay about sweaty palm, or whatever it might be. That is something that really differentiates a student in that pool of over 30,000 applicants. We always look at students through the scope of the lens of what is that student potentially bringing to our college campus. And that's where the unique differences between each and every individual that's applying to our school really is something that we can focus in on. If a student is, like you were just saying, if they are working a part-time job and still being responsible for members of their family and still maintaining a great GPA, that is someone who's going to bring a certain something to our campus that is going to be different than the student who is able to do research and shadow doctors at a hospital. They're going to bring something else to the campus, which is also going to be different from the student who's involved in theater productions and who has an affinity for writing poetry and who happens to be very engaged in some type of cultural activity in high school or otherwise. I think the notion of a student being well-rounded and being involved in very different things is something that can be synonymous in the sense that what a well-rounded means for each individual student can be different. And I think that's something to really make sure that you are keeping in mind as you go throughout the next couple of years, a year and a half or 2.5 years of your high school career, noting that there are certain activities that you do because you enjoy them, and we really want to hear about those. There are certain things that you are suddenly going to maybe not enjoy as much anymore. You're going to pick up something else, and that's fine with us as well. The diversity of the activities that you're doing helps to differentiate you. The amount of time that you invest in certain activities that you love so very much is something that helps to differentiate you. That's the unique situation that you find yourself in, is that you have access to so many different things, so many different opportunities here in this high school and in this community that you live in that I think you can flourish by taking advantage of. And when we're looking at the students that are applying to UConn, we want them to be sure that they are articulating the things that they enjoy and that they're going to continue to use. We always like to see what students can potentially bring to our campus and what they can contribute to campus life. And that's a very special process that we go through with each and every individual student.
Thank you. Along probably the same line of questioning, and maybe this is a little bit redundant, but Cynthia, if I can ask you, many students qualify for their dream school, but not all are accepted. How do we separate that admitted student from the other? We frequently hear student A was academically qualified, an amazing resume, but was not accepted. Yet a student with perhaps a less stellar transcript and resume was accepted. How do you address that statement?
Well, it's difficult. And I will tell you that every year we cry that we can't admit as many students as we'd like. That's a simple fact. And I may sound a little like a broken record, but I'm going to come back to that concept of fit in part. I mean, just for what it's worth, I have worked at or with 16 different liberal arts colleges in the Northeast. And what has always been interesting to me is that each one is different. each one has its own distinct culture. And yet, when I speak with prospective students, so many of them say that they want to go to a liberal arts college because of this and that, and feel that any of the liberal arts colleges would be good. And each of those colleges is great, but it comes down to which one is the right fit for you, or which ones are the right fit for you. And so I'm saying this because when you figure it out, when you hand in your application, it becomes our challenge, actually, sitting on the other side to try to figure out which is the best fit for our given college. And if we, chances of admitting somebody are going to be better if we have a good, strong sense of the fit. And that's going to come through the common app, that's going to come through the essay, it can really come through an interview, it can come through additional contacts, but it's not good. It's really not in our interest to admit you when it's not in your interest to be admitted because you're not going to have the experience.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
So there's also another term that you'll hear quite a bit, it's demonstrated interest. And I know when we're reading applications, I think all of us look to find students in our institution, whether it's an academic fit, whether it's an extracurricular fit, whether it's a social fit, maybe that there's extenuating circumstances that you can support for, whether it's learning differences, emotional issues, whatever it may be, fits in that way. But demonstrated interest is also very important. And demonstrated interest, I think for a lot of us, it's quality, not quantity. So you don't have to visit our campus 15 times. It's a lot of drives back and forth. But demonstrated interest in the sense of, when I'm reading Wilton High School applications, okay, we'll say we'll get 10 applications for Wilton High School, okay? And some of them will be very similar in terms of their academic accomplishments, their extracurricular activities. But I'm looking at these and saying, okay, well, I know these 4 or 5 students. They've been engaged with home art music process. I know them. I think that we have a better chance of yielding these students. These students have a more genuine interest in our institution than possibly these other students. So we want to invest our offers of admission to students that we think truly love us. Okay. Now, granted, you're not going to be able to visit every school that you're looking at. Maybe it's a school that's great distance away. But there's other ways to engage in the process. You can contact the admissions counselor, visit with the college or university when they're in your area. So there's ways to engage in the process. But we're looking at that through this whole evaluation situation.
And your school tracks demonstrated interest. Could you add to that?
We track demonstrated interest in a big picture way. So if I come to the college fair at Wilton and you stop by my table, that's going to be on our list. If you come to visit Union, which I hope you will, that's going to be on our list. If you have an interview, that's going to be on the list. Those things are all ways of doing demonstrated interest. You don't need to bring me candy, although I do like candy. You don't need to bend over backwards. You don't need to make up a story to email me, but you do need to do those things. We were talking about figuring out the right balance. If you've met me a couple of times, it's a great pleasure to hear from you and be in touch with you, but it doesn't make a difference. Better that you spend your time on your activities or involvements. I just want to mention one thing. I hope that the students and parents will think not to say something like, my child didn't get in but should have, and this child who didn't deserve it did get in. It's such a hard thing. I always think about it in this term. Let's say a student comes up and says, I got into Union. I'm so excited. It's my first choice. It's my early decision. I'm thrilled I'm admitted. And a student on the other side of the room says, oh yes, well that's my safety school. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And it's a great college either way, I can assure you of that. But we just want to be very careful about the words we say, about what people deserve or don't deserve, what happens or doesn't happen. Colleges pick students because they're talented athletes. Colleges are often looking for bassoon players, so get practicing. Colleges are looking for students who will honestly study chemistry and physics. When my daughter applied to college, remember she was the treasurer of the German club, colleges are looking for German majors. She put down she wanted to major in French and German. I said, no, it will not be a lie. Put down German and French. So those are things that colleges may pick special candidates for. And it may not appear fair. Oh, is it fair?
I just wanted to add, I just think this point is so important to emphasize, and I think you guys have to remember, colleges want to admit the students who most want to be at our colleges. And so, I think all of us, especially the question that I hear a lot is, this student had higher test scores, they had better grades, but they weren't admitted because the student with the lower academic profile was. Well, it may very well have been that that student with the lower academic profile wanted to be appealing more than the other student. I think that students may be surprised at how much we can read in your application what you're saying, but also what you're not saying. So I can tell almost immediately when I'm reviewing an application from a student who's thrown it together last minute, has really put a lot of thought into the statements, and then a student who has maybe emailed me a couple times, I met at their high school, and they have such passionate, clear, articulate reasons for being interested in school. So for tonight, we could certainly admit an entire incoming class of students with a 35 on the ECT and valedictorians, but we don't want that. I don't think any of us want a class of all people that are exactly the same. We all want the students who most want to be at our schools, and those are all different kinds of students. So they're high academic profile students, lower academic profile students, they all bring something special. So remember, if there's a school that you're really excited about, then make sure that we can perceive that excitement, because then we're going to be more likely to be excited about you as well, regardless of your, of your academic profile. It's really like everything else you're bringing to those people. And that's the students that I personally want to advocate for, the ones who I really know want to be here.
Anyone else want to add to that? I know it's an important question.
Yeah, this one's a big one for me. This is the thing that I think that as a small school, and there are a couple of other ones on this panel, the big thing that makes me sad, very genuinely, is when a student tells me that basically a friend of theirs is doing something differently than they are, and they feel like they're doing something wrong. I echo in very deeply. Everybody is different, and everybody has a different fit. We've said that several times. Try very hard to think outside the bumper sticker. Try very hard to think outside of what your neighbor is doing. Because in 20 years, what the kid who had a 95 on his test does will not matter to you. And I know that sounds really lame right now, trust me. But I genuinely believe that the college process has to be about you, your fit, and try very hard to kind of put your blinders on and be who you are, and find a place that you are most proud of. I gotta be honest, in a generation full of hipsters, I always find it really interesting when kids say, I just wanted to get into X school. Isn't it much cooler to find a program you're so excited about, no matter where it is, that you get to look at your classmates and say, guys, I got into this awesome program, and it is everything I've ever wanted, and I'm gonna have so much fun for the next 4 years. Try to look at it that way. I think all of us would agree that those are the kind of students that we want to meet, and also that's what's going to make me the happiest. No matter if it's an Ivy, if it's a big school, you got to find what works best for you. And I just echo all of them. You guys have made great points. Definitely look for what's best.
Thank you. All of us. Thank you very much. We talked a little bit about early decision, early action, and regular decision. Becky, may I start with you? As an Ivy League school, what percentage do you accept students' early decision? And of those early decision applicants, how many are athletes versus non-athletes?
Good questions. So we at Yale have what's called a single choice early action program. The early action portion of that means that it's a non-binding option. Students who are admitted hear from us in the middle of December with that news, but they have until May 1st, which is the common candidate's reply date, to let us know whether they will be enrolling or not. Students may submit as many regular decision applications as they would like, see how those pan out, compare financial aid awards, things like that. The single choice portion of things does mean that students basically sign off on their application, letting us know that Yale's the only school to which they're applying through an early program. There are some big exceptions to that. Students may apply to public universities at any time or through rolling programs or schools abroad as well. So that's the variation that we use on early. Obviously, there are early decision programs, which are binding as well. I've worked at other institutions that have early decision programs, and then obviously regular decision. Sometimes there's a second round of early decision, an EB2 option, which some schools on the panel may run. So there are a few different ways of doing this, and it's important to do some research and figure out how each school handles their early process. I also say it's important to do a little research and figure out how it is that schools are evaluating these early applications. For us, there really isn't any added weight put on an application that comes to us early. We work pretty hard, as much as we can as human beings on the admissions committee, to maintain the level of evaluation, maintain where the bar is consistently across the early action and the regular decision round. So when I present candidates to our committee early, and I'm all enthusiastic about my candidates, someone on the committee is going to say, Becky, here it is November 30th. Are you going to be as excited about this candidate once you've read 1,500 applications as you are now when you've only read 250? And I have to honestly be able to say, yes, I'd be advocating for this student at any point in the process. So that's how it plays out for us. Over the past few years, we've probably admitted anywhere between 40 and 45% of our class through the early action round. So that's part of the equation. I would also say, though, so that's sort of the makeup of the class, we do also tend to have a higher acceptance rate early, and that's public knowledge, than we do in the regular decision round. And there are a few different things that play into that. We do tend to see, across all metrics, our strongest group of candidates come to us early. Students do a very good job of self-selecting, and we have an incredibly strong pool early. So that, in some ways, inflates the acceptance rate early. Those are students who we would take whenever they apply. We also have many of our recruited athletes who are coming to us as early applicants because our coaches are encouraging them to apply early so that they have their recruiting classes wrapped up on the early side of things too. And so that, and through, I don't know if we'll talk too much about the recruitment process tonight. We are a Division I program athletically, and our coaches do have the ability to recruit students. They have the ability, starting in the summer prior to a student's senior year, to confer with the admissions office about those candidates. And so coaches are very smart about this and know well what is a competitive candidate to Yale. And so those student athletes who've gotten to the point of being supported by a coach in this process have very strong indications that this is probably a good match. And so that also, in many ways, inflates that acceptance rate early on. So I think that's the best way that I can answer that. So I think it's a very, and I'll stop. It's a very big question. And one of the things philosophically, I think that sometimes gets to me a little bit about this process more and more. I've been doing this for 15, 16 years now at different places, and I hear more and more from students in September and October when I'm visiting high schools, I need to find my early school because there's this assumption I need to apply somewhere early, and I just need to figure out where that place is. And my personal preference would be that students go about this process, and if they find themselves in September, October of their senior year with a school that is a pretty clear top choice for them, then it may be time to start thinking about, is an early application something that would make sense for me? But I'd much prefer that students work on the very important work of figuring out the schools to which they will apply initially before deciding which kind of program, early, rolling, regular, they'll choose. And the one last piece of advice is just to think about, these deadlines come awfully early. And in our office, because of how selective the process is, students can actually put a weaker foot forward by applying early. Meaning that if a student is on that great trajectory that Anna was talking about earlier, they may have had a slower start to high school academically, and they really kick it into high gear their junior year with great rigor, they may not be ready for us to see their best work until we've seen a full semester of their senior year. And if they're applying to us for a November 1st deadline, we're going to be lucky to have their first quarter grades. And that may not allow them to put their best foot forward. So we constantly encourage students in our office to think about what their application is going to look like and apply at the time where they are going to have the greatest strength to that application.
Thank you so much. Great answer. Sarah, as a large school, could you briefly just give us a little bit of a heads up about the reading of the application? Because we had talked about this before. Do you really read everything? I mean, that's one of those questions that we also get. You're in behind a closed door with a magic computer and your magic cape, and you selected the students. Do you really read all of those essays?
We really do. So as mentioned, reading, I mean, for most of us, looks like 2 monitors in our office, and typically near crunch time, late at night, our office is nice to buy us dinner, so we rotate, so we'll have Vietnamese one night, and Italian the next. So we're well fed, which means we're happy with the reading your applications. We've added in we actually be very plump if we ate as many of these. So we actually read every single application. No application is, deemed unworthy of reading based on test scores. So we read every single application. So I can speak for our office, we read regionally. So I will be the first reader for all of the applications from Connecticut and my other territory, Westchester. And basically the way it works in our office, we all do this a little bit differently. But because of my familiarity with the high schools, because I understand, the way things work in this region, I have the best insight into who you are within the context of your high school as an applicant from Connecticut. So I will read your entire application. I will read your personal statement, your optional statement if you choose to write one. I will look at your extracurriculars. I typically keep an Excel database of communication that I have with students throughout the semester. I'll go back and look at my list and see if you emailed, what we chatted about. I'll put notes about that in your application. And then from that point, I'll make a recommended decision. So for us with an early action application, we will either choose to admit a student or we will choose to defer. So we don't deny any students early action. We will just defer because we need a little bit more time or information from the student. So I will make a recommended decision, and then it will go on to the admission committee to see whether or not they agree with me. So in the best case scenario, hopefully they agree and think that I've made the right decision, but there are times when they disagree, and so in that instance, the student would be deferred to our regular decision review. So again, I'm sure we all do that differently, but when I'm reading applications, as I mentioned earlier, I feel that I have the best ability to advocate for my student, which is very much what being the regional reader allows me to do. I've met you, I went to your high school, I know what you're all about, and I can make a very clear case for you in my recommendation about why I think that you would be a strong member of the community, and then hopefully my admission committee members. So we read everything, and also I really love your personal statements, where I think you write something funny, I printed out, and I keep it in the folder in my desk.
Can I just put in perspective too? I think they calculate the average amount of time admissions counselors spend reading an application is 15 minutes. That's usually how long it would take us to read an application. And then there could be more than one set of eyes on it, but that's the average length of time it takes to read all the materials that we receive.
Do you go on to a second read?
A lot of schools, every school does it differently. Sometimes there's committees, sometimes there's second readers. Every school does it differently. But for the first read, I know some applications will not take as long, some will take longer. Just invest the time that's needed. But 15 minutes is usually the amount of time it takes to read from front to back of the application. That's all it takes.
Peter, I was not going to skip you because you did read those 32,000 applications, right? Okay.
I didn't read every single one of those. I have a great team of colleagues. I was at dinner when I first started working at UConn, looking at my first reading season. At the time, a great friend of mine, maybe not so much after this comment, said, Peter, you realize that if you only work the hours that you do in your contract during the day and still take an hour for lunch, you have to read an application every 8 minutes in order to get this done by the time it needs to be done. And I said, thank you, Steve. You made my dinner tonight. And second of all, my first comment was, well, we just work longer. At this point, the late nights in the office, sometimes early mornings, those are all just pieces of the application reading season. such a high volume, specifically UConn. I know that there are times where my colleagues and I will all say, okay, we'll stay late this Wednesday, or is anyone signing onto the computer from home on Saturday? We'll go on and we'll all read together, keep each other company. I mean, it's a process. Last year, in particular, just from this part of the state, there were over 3,000 applicants. I think it was, and I read over 3,000 essays. And when you factor in a counselor letter recommendation plus the 2 that we recommend is to be sent to UConn, that's over 9,000 letters of recommendation. But at the same time, we want to make sure that every single applicant is receiving the review that they deserve. You put a lot of time and effort into everything that they're putting on that application, into that personal statement, into figuring out who you'd like to have as your recommenders. And as a result of that, if it means working a couple extra hours to make sure we really get a chance to meet you and know you and understand who you are, that's what we're going to do. And that is not just me in terms of my office in particular, that's everyone in the office. I'm sure everyone on this panel will, regardless of the amount of applications they receive, will say something very similar, that we continue reading until we feel that we have given that application its due diligence, its due time, its due review, and because we know how important and how difficult process it is to want to have it in this workplace.
Thank you. We have incorporated a number of questions from the audience and from students over the course of the past couple of weeks as we've advertised for this presentation. I do have a couple of questions that came in past couple of days that I'd like to ask you, but before I move on to that, sort of to end the discussion about this process, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, how does social media affect the student in this college admissions process? Do you have a student social media account? And have you ever rescinded or denied admittance to a student due to their social media? And do you expect students to follow you on all of your Twitter accounts and Facebook? And I know you all have them. Sarah?
That's funny. It's just funny because I think of the last time I saw a student's social media account, she included a link to her nail art blog in her comment app, and I spent about 15 minutes just fascinated with the things that she could do with nail polish. But typically, no. I think many of us, especially with compliance with Tulane, had 26,000 applications last year, so I don't think we all have time to go online and look up your name on Facebook or type in your Twitter account. I think that something I've noticed this year is a lot of students are sending me their personal websites, which I didn't see as much of that last year. So you guys are very big into your brand, which I think is great. If you do have something like that, I'll definitely take a look at it. But I think for the most part, we're not. We just don't probably have time to go search for your Instagram account. But I would say I would recommend if you find your admission counselor on Facebook, don't try to add us because we will not accept you. And with that being said, I know at least for Tulane, once we've admitted students, we have a Tulane class of, so this year we'll have the Tulane class of 2020 Facebook. And once you're an admitted student, you're welcome to join the group, and then that can be a really awesome space for discussion and meeting future roommates and talking about orientation and packing and things like that. But we're also, we're on the Facebook page, maybe monitoring to see if you have questions, but we're not going to look at your Facebook pictures to see if you've done something that is, perhaps inappropriate. So I think be smart about your social media. Don't put up things that if we were to stumble across it, if you didn't know that your nail art blog had a link to your inappropriate blog or something. Just be smart. Just remember, with the thing with social media is that what's out there is out there, and it kind of lives on there forever. So just be smart. Don't put pictures that you wouldn't want an admission counselor to see in a place where we could potentially see them. But no, I don't think I can think of any instances where I was trying to track it down and see what you tweeted about last.
Yeah, I mean, small school perspective, I had 300 students last year. So different from you guys. We had 6,000 applications. So one of the things I just want to stress again is this industry uses somewhat mixed messages. So we'll say things like join the class of 2020 page, like us on Facebook, hashtag Black Love on Instagram. one more time, please do not confuse that with your personal accounts for your admissions counselors. I'm sure everyone at this table probably has a story about a student that has tried. It does not affect the way we feel about you. It makes us feel rather guilty because we like you as people, just not at that level. And I think all of us can agree. I also have spent enough time in the depths of a student's blog to agree. If you write creatively and you're applying to an English program and you want us to see that, that's awesome. But also keep in mind that some institutions like mine, we don't go searching out. We cannot. That's on us. That's a thing that our office just specifically does not do. So, but Sarah, please be mindful. You never know. That's a thing I think everyone is learning.
Thank you. I just have a few more questions that came from the audience this week, and you all did a great job. Me just sort of throwing questions out to you and not having them assigned. So I do thank you. Cynthia, though, you're up for this one. What do schools offer for students who have had accommodations in high school? For example, extra time, modified assignments. Does it work the same way at the college level as it does at the high school level?
Excuse me, it may or it may not. And so what we always, and that has to do with state law, it's required and it isn't. So what we always recommend is that any student who has a concern about accommodations speak with our office for accessibility services in advance, even in advance of applying, and have a conversation by phone or even better in person. That would be more possible for you, say, than somebody in Washington State or wherever. But in order to talk about your needs and how they've been met in the past and what the college would be able to provide, so you actually make a decision on the basis of the real and not the ideal. And we're very proud of what our office and our network of resources offers, but it's so important for you, to feel confident that you are going to be able to thrive in a college community that you choose. So check that out.
Thank you. Becky, this question was sent to us the other day. We were talking about the essay, so we can be very brief on this. Is there a time frame that a student should use when writing their personal statement? Should the focus be primarily on the experience that they've had during high school?
It's a good question about the time frame of an essay. This is actually something that we discuss as a staff from time to time. That I would say the best advice is the more current, the better. And it may be that a student weaves in life experiences from a very young age as part of the narrative that they choose. But in my opinion, we want to get to know the student who will be arriving on our campus in August of the coming year. And so the more students can give us the current version of themselves, the better. That being said, many students will have important formative experiences that come along with earlier phases of their lives, and that's fine, but I would say staying away from having the story purely be about the birthday party in 5th grade that was so meaningful, or having it needs to connect to the now and what's going on and what's important now, because that's what we want to know about. And along the same lines, our advice would also be thinking about choosing recommenders. Choose teachers who've taught you in junior or senior year. They've seen the most recent version of you as a student. And although teachers who taught a student in freshman or sophomore year may have lovely things to say, that we are not often getting the most up-to-date information on students. So it tends to be most helpful for us to have that more current and recent information.
Perfect, thank you. I do have one more question that I received, and I don't want to keep this audience any longer. I'm anxious to get home for the debates, as well as avoid all the rain. And then we will have a few moments if someone has a pressing question that they would like to address this panel. The final question that came in was, Anne, I'll give this one to you. Do independent college counseling services really provide a competitive advantage to students. That is, are necessary to get into highly selective schools? And if yes, what should a parent look for in choosing a college counseling service or advisor?
They are not necessary because they really cannot improve your grades, classes, or those test scores you present. But sometimes parents are very anxious. I know this because I am a parent. And therefore, an independent counselor is willing to listen to you and thousands of questions. But I'm suspecting that your school counselors are willing to listen to hundreds of questions. So if you think you're going to need to ask thousands of questions, then there might be a place for an independent counselor. I think sometimes it's like the wedding planner, the bride and the mother are going to get along a little better if they have a wedding planner. I have not seen any improvements in admission from students who work with independent counselors. And I want to caution you very seriously on one area. We all believe that students should write their own essays. And we know perfectly well that independent counselors write. And how do we know this? They call us and tell us that they do it. An independent counselor called me and said, there's a little quirk with the common application, and one of our questions floated away, and somehow the next week popped back up again. And she said, you've added a new question. We haven't prepared that one. Well, who do I want to have prepared? I want the student to do it. I want the student to get into college. I want the student to have the full confidence that he or she got there. So if you have a lot of questions, and if you know you need that additional support and time to ask a million questions about the college process, and it's like my neighbors who call me, they say, I'm sorry I'm calling, but I'm desperate tonight and I need to talk about the college process. I understand the feeling, that could help, but they're not going to get you into a particular college, and they're not going to give you an edge in a particular environment.
Are we all going to agree with the even funding round? Becky?
Anne did a wonderful job answering the question. The other thing that I always want to put out there, because it seems it's second nature to me because it's my job every day, but it doesn't seem to be common knowledge out there. Typically in admissions offices, there is an admissions officer who is on duty on any given day, and we are there. We rotate in our office. Other offices that I've worked in have worked similarly, and there is an admissions officer who is a reader and someone who sits on the admissions committee, who is the one that phone calls with questions get forwarded to, the one who answers the emails for that day that come into the general questions account. And so if there are questions and things, know that that is a good outlet for them as well. Counselors call us and ask questions, families and students may call us and ask questions. So know that that is another very good resource as well.
Could I mention one other thing that my husband, who's a former director of financial aid, would love me to say? We've discovered that there's some agencies and groups out there that say, if you give us some money, we'll get you outside scholarships. And just so you know, that's not necessary to get outside scholarships. You can go ahead and apply for them. You can learn about them in your career center. You don't need a handler to apply for financial aid.
Thank you. And anyone else want to add anything? You all know in your head. Before I ask for any questions from the audience, I just do want to acknowledge Duncan Vogel. Duncan, where are you? Someplace. Oh, there you are. Duncan has been live tweeting this event this evening, so thank you very much. See how popular you're going to be now? All right. Before I say thank you and send you all, do you have any questions from the audience? We have a wonderful counselor waiting with a handheld microphone that she's trying to work. But I have one out here, I normally do one. So,
You go to an interview, you email a thank you. So I was talking about email communication to students, not just to them. I would say when you don't talk about email, just kind of check in. It seems like you're saying that
saying it's surprising that we want to hear from students. Stalking is illegal in every state. But I mean, here's the thing to remember. All of us up here represent admissions, college admissions counselors. We're human. We like the human side of it. I always love going down to my mailbox in the office and I call them the love letters. Okay, I love getting the handwritten notes from students that I've met. We do enjoy receiving emails. I mean, an email every day, a bit much, but an email every once in a while is appropriate. Here's one thing I want to warn you about. If we receive an email from a student, we want it to be from that student. We have had parents posing as their son or daughter. You do not want to do that. Make sure email addresses are appropriate. I did have my first inappropriate parent email address. It was listed, I think the mother listed it as my hot man, Dave, was her cousin's first name, so that was quite amusing. But no, I mean, we do, there's a very human element to this that I think a lot of people forget. So we enjoy meeting students. Like I said, stalking is a crime. But engaging with the admissions counselor, I think, is an important thing if they have the ability to do that, or students at that school. I think peer-to-peer interaction is crucial in this process.
In case I wasn't clear, I think that what I was trying to articulate earlier was that I love when I get to know my students, and I certainly don't get that opportunity with all of them from my territories, but students who reach out and email me, and again, it doesn't have to be a long, essay about their interests, but just, email me after a campus visit, telling me how much they love Tulane, they had beignets, you guys love beignets. So those are the kinds of communications that I think are appropriate. I have, so whenever I get handwritten thank you notes from students after I've met them, I put them up on my wall, so I have an entire bulletin board of notes from students, and the students who, I stay in touch with, I have several students who are freshmen this year who come to my office and tell me, the club they just joined, and we'll go have lunch with the student center. That is hands down the best part of this job, the student element, getting to know students and be so proud. I call it my baby sometimes because I feel like I've been able to bring someone to campus and I'm so proud of that I want to be there. Again, it's not the case with every single student, not every student wants to build that relationship with me. That's fine, but I think if you're a student and you are excited about a school and you want to let your admission counselor know that you're excited, then you'll do that, and more than likely you'll do that in the appropriate way. Don't stalk us and don't email us every day and tell us what you had for lunch. But if there's a communication that you want to send us that feels appropriate and conveys your interest in our university, then you should do it.
Yeah, I real quick would like to say, also for students, if you're emailing us to tell us about your interest, one of the hardest emails for me to read is when a student uses very, very large vocab words that sound out of place. So things like, I am so impressed by the academic rigor and the gorgeous campus, but it doesn't sound like that. It sounds airy. It sounds like they use the thesaurus and use some lofty vocab. Be yourself. I'm with everybody else. I mean, I think that, one of my favorite interactions, sometimes I feel like I'm harassing students because I'm emailing them back to say, wait, there's another student I want you to email. It happened today. I had a faculty member who I had a prospective student say, I'd really like to talk to someone in environmental science. So I usually say, all right, I'll email the faculty member, they email me a blurb, I'll send it back to you. Well, instead, the faculty member said, can I talk to the student directly? And so emailing us can actually help you get in touch with the people who are going to be able to talk to you about your experience. As far as, don't bother us, that's our job. And my boss would tell you that that is a very large part of my job. None of us in my office do not have time to walk downstairs and see a student. There's absolutely never going to be a time, I think, on any of our campuses, if a student says, I'd like to be an admissions counselor, even if just for a brief second. The students are the reason we're there. So please thank us. Please email us. Please say something. I think especially distinguish yourself as somebody who wants to say hello. That's half the fun.
Can I say, can I add just one quick thing? Sorry, I know we went into more, and I do not want to sound cold by saying this at all. It's probably going to come across that way. I love the relationships that I have with students through this process. It is absolutely a highlight in getting to know these students. But I think sometimes students feel as though they need to send something, and so we get emails that look like, Dear Ms. Heinen, could you please tell me more about your psychology program? Thanks, Johnny. when there are ample resources all over the internet that can answer that question for that student. And so I am playing devil's advocate a little bit. Just be thoughtful about and purposeful in the communication that takes place. When a student sends me a very pointed and appropriate question that they could not have found readily on our website, I'm very happy to respond to that, and that certainly makes a very positive impression. But I just hate for students to feel as though they need to be just sending out sort of general emails because they think that the email itself is what is important. It's the content, in my point.
Yes, how do you view a student who chooses to take a gap year?
We love it. We recommend that the student apply while still a senior in high school because all the recommenders, the documents are all quickly available. Then get admitted, enroll, and write to us and say, here's what I'm going to do for my gap year. Some colleges demur on gap years if they're going to take a student off the wait list because they need that student to come that fall. But many colleges offer gap year options.
You're all shaking your heads, so I'm going to assume that's true of all of you. Yes, Peter?
Just one thing to add, just particularly part of kind of managing our class and the students that are coming in, especially with the regional campuses, which is another kind of nuance and difference that we might have. Students who we don't necessarily have permanent policy in our office, including for a gap. There are very extenuating circumstances where a student who applied to UConn was decided to, there's military service or illness that might prevent them from starting that fall. And that's something we offer permanent for. But regarding gap years, we don't necessarily discourage a student from doing it in that regard. We just will need to see the application from that student the following year to be considered in that pool. So it's definitely not viewed as a negative by any means, even though, there's sometimes where a student can prefer, maybe other institutions and do that gap year and still have that acceptance that they receive hold true for the following year. And that's not necessarily the policy you come, but at the same time, it's never to the student's detriment to take the age to do a gap year to get that potentially worldly experience and then apply to UConn.
Answer your question? Is that good?
First of all, I think this is fantastic. First time. But I love the information about regional application. Start with the concept that the first round is you're going to be looking at the principles and the process analysis and never get into the essays. I know
You must roll the dots or whatever. But did you notice that the majority of us are going to unweight the grades and we're going to calculate that GPA? I would say to you, consider the number of applications a university or college receives. If a college receives fewer than 1,000 applications, chances are the whole thing is being read. If a college receives 45,000 applications, even with the addition of outside readers and with support, that may be a shorter read. Any situation, where that might be, it would never hit UConn. I know that. But at Wisconsin, don't you think? If you want to be a badger, the chances are that your application is getting a shorter read. So think about the colleges or universities by the size of the school, the size, the volume, and the applicant. Oh, there's some Wisconsin fans. And so that is a way that I would consider that. When Suzanne said, did you say 15 minutes average? Some places 15 minutes. Our new readers would say 20 minutes to half an hour. We're really, at how long for you, Ben?
I'm a pretty slow reader, so I'm actually in the 20 minutes to half an hour camp.
So in many places, the whole thing is being read. And there is that pat phrase that people say holistic review, but that means we read every page. And my impression here is that everyone does it. So Wisconsin, notwithstanding. Did we answer that for you? Peter.
So, like I believe maybe I said that, I thought I said it earlier, so I think it was earlier today, I'm not sure. A lot of stuff. But, I will read through the is what they do in high school and a bit about their career before I looked at the training in high school. So, and I am the first year before application here in every single one of those 3,000 that I did across my list. So I can say, very personal experience from having read the application myself, that I do, I will read through, despite the volume, the common app itself in its entirety, be the letter of recommendation and then use the text of successful after that. So while it may take a little bit longer, that's okay. That's okay. And Wisconsin, like I said, notwithstanding, I stick on that, but that you kind of can say from experience what I do personally.
We don't want to keep everybody, but another question?
Yeah, I also just wanted to know the school
So the question is basically advice on how to choose courses in the years of high school, so junior and senior.
Right, are we moving on to AP courses and honors, or are we staying at our current level?
I think all of us would say it's been a pretty continuous theme here, have balance. At the same time, you need to take courses that will challenge you, but are appropriate to your learning level. Okay, if you're not someone who's at a level that can handle 5 AP courses, you shouldn't be taking 5 AP courses. If you received a B- in pre-calculus your junior year, you probably shouldn't be taking AP Calc your senior year. So we want to see you take a rigorous course load. We want to see you stretching yourself academically, but it needs to be appropriate to where your ability level is. The last thing we want to see is you taking a rigorous course load that is above where you are and struggling in courses because of that.
I'd also just say that your course choices are a good opportunity to indicate to us particular interests. And some students may have found their academic interests that really are driving them by the time they get into their junior and senior year, and others may still be more undecided, and either of those routes can lead to successful college admission consequences. But I think for students who have found areas that are especially interesting to them, to potentially double up in a science if that area is what interests them, or take 2 humanities courses, that's something that I would encourage as well, if it truly is the student's interest that is driving that. There's nothing in particular in that way that I'd say we're looking for on our side of things, but it is a way for students to indicate to us what's important to them.
We're getting very intimate here. But we're moving. We can have somebody right here.
Yeah, one last one.
Do you pay attention to date of birth at all? If you're 2 year age, some people start developing 17, 19.
I don't know about you guys, but in our system, we have a dashboard, and when I read applications, the first thing that comes up is actually, your date of birth. I don't ever pay attention except to think that for anybody in the room that was born in 1997, or that's the year Titanic came out, and I was in kindergarten. So usually if I'm paying attention to date of birth, I'm like, whoa, these kids are babies. And I know that sounds like really, really ridiculous coming from me. But I know we personally do not. I think the only time it's usually important to us is if a student is a non-traditional student. They usually have been in contact with the office beforehand. I don't know how you guys work with non-traditional freshmen on your campus, so we require all of our first-year students to live on campus. So the concern there would be, I know we, in fact, had this issue this past fall, or this one right now. We have a student on campus who is 16, but her family happens to live in town. So she lives at home right now, and when she is 17 or 18, then she'll come join her peers on campus, but that was what the family felt was best. Usually if the student is a little older, a non-traditional first-year student, like I said, they've been in touch with us, and they usually are a local of the area and can kind of come to campus. The only time it's a concern is usually during the housing process for us.
Thank you so very much. And thank you for